The cold hits you first, not the dark, not the hunger, the cold. It is minus 30 degrees outside your shelter. Your breath freezes before it leaves your mouth. You have no heater, no down jacket, no glass windows to keep the wind out. For roughly 20,000 years, this was not a nightmare. This was Tuesday. This was the last glacial maximum, the coldest point of the most recent ice age. And your ancestors did not just endure it. They raised children in it. They fell in love in it. They grew old in it. So how did a soft, hairless tropical primate survive the harshest climate our species has ever faced? You need to understand something first. Humans did not evolve for cold. Strip away our clothing and our fire and we are, biologically, a species built for the African savanna. Thin skin, sparse hair, a body that overheats easily and loses warmth fast. By every physical measure, we should not have made it through an ice age at all. And yet you did, your ancestors did. Not by growing thicker fur, not by hibernating, by something far stranger and far more powerful, by thinking their way around biology itself. Let's start with the obvious question. Where do you even live when the entire world outside is trying to kill you? Archaeologists have found the answer buried in the frozen soil of what is now Ukraine and Russia. At a site called Mezhyrich, researchers uncovered the remains of homes built almost entirely out of mammoth bones, not wood, not stone bones. Anthropologist Olga Sofer spent decades studying these structures, and what she found reshaped how we understand Ice Age life. The builders used mammoth skulls and jawbones as a foundation, stacked long leg bones like architectural beams, and layered tusks over the top to form a curved dome-like frame. Then they covered the whole structure in animal hides, sealing in warmth and sealing out wind. Think about the scale of that undertaking. A single mammoth could weigh over 6 tons. Building one dwelling required the bones of dozens of animals. This was not a shelter thrown together in an afternoon. This was architecture. This was planning across seasons, maybe even years, to gather enough material to build a home that could outlast a Siberian winter. And these were not caves. They were freestanding houses, built by hand on open, treeless plains where the wind had nothing to stop it. Your ancestors were not hiding from the Ice Age. They were building against it. Inside those bone houses, the next problem was heat. And this is where fire stops being a convenience and becomes the single most important technology in human history. Fire meant warmth, obviously, but it meant far more than that. It meant cooked food, which is easier to digest and carries more usable calories, which matters enormously when you are burning huge amounts of energy just to stay alive in freezing temperatures. It meant protection from predators who also wanted to get out of the cold. It meant light during nights that this close to the poles in winter could stretch for 18 hours or more. Archaeologist Will Robrooks, who has spent much of his career studying the deep history of fire use in Europe, found something striking when he examined sites across the continent. Evidence of controlled fire becomes dramatically more common and more sophisticated right around the time humans were pushing into the coldest, most northern parts of their range. Fire was not just present. It was the reason those places became livable at all. Picture it. You are inside a mammoth bone dwelling, hide stretched taut over the frame. A fire burns at the center, smoke curling up through a gap left in the roof. The air near the flames is almost too warm. The air by the walls is still sharp with cold. You sleep close to the fire, wrapped in fur, other bodies pressed near for warmth too. Someone stirs the coals in the night to keep them alive until morning. This was not a special occasion. This was every single night for thousands of generations. But shelter and fire only solve part of the problem. Step outside, and you still have to survive the actual air on your skin. This is where clothing enters the story, and it enters more cleverly than you might expect. For a long time, researchers wondered how they could even prove that ancient humans wore tailored clothing rather than simply draping themselves in hides like a blanket. The evidence, it turns out, was hiding in a tiny, unassuming tool, the eyed needle. Bone needles with a small hole for thread have been found at Ice Age sites dating back over 40,000 years. A draped hide keeps you warm. A needle means something different. It means fitted clothing, sleeves, layers. Seams sealed tight enough to trap body heat and keep wind out entirely. This detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Tailored, layered clothing was likely one of the true turning points that allowed humans to survive in the coldest parts of Ice Age Eurasia at all, places Neanderthals, despite their own cold adaptations, may never have fully occupied. Your ancestors were not just wearing fur, they were engineering it. Multiple layers, understanding which animal hides insulated best, which needed to be worn fur in versus fur out, how to waterproof boots with grease rendered from animal fat. This was specialized, transmitted knowledge passed from parent to child, refined over generations, the Ice Age equivalent of high-performance outdoor gear. Now let's talk about the burial that changed everything we thought we knew about how seriously these people took the cold and how seriously they took each other. At a site called Sungir in Russia, archaeologists uncovered the remains of an adult male and 2 children buried together roughly 34,000 years ago. What stopped researchers in their tracks was not the burial itself, but what was buried with thousands of ivory beads, arranged in patterns that made it clear they had been sewn directly onto clothing. Based on the placement of the beads, researchers were able to reconstruct the outfits these individuals were likely wearing. Fitted trousers, long-sleeved tunics, fur-lined boots, hats. This was not survival clothing thrown on in desperation. This was clothing with craftsmanship, clothing that took enormous time to make, clothing beautiful enough to be worn into the afterlife. Whoever made those garments understood something we tend to forget today. In a world without central heating, the clothes on your back were not fashion. They were the thin, engineered boundary between you and death, and your ancestors decorated that boundary anyway. They made survival beautiful. So let's put all of this together and reconstruct an actual day. You wake up inside a mammoth-bone house wrapped in layered fur, the fire down to embers but still glowing. Someone feeds it fresh fuel, and within minutes the warmth spreads again. You dress in tailored, fitted clothing, tying fur boots tight at the ankle to keep snow from getting in. Outside, the wind is sharp enough to sting exposed skin in seconds, so almost none of your skin is exposed at all. The group moves as a unit. Splitting up in this environment is not just inconvenient, it can be fatal. Hunters track reindeer or mammoth across open, snow-covered plains, reading tracks that most modern humans would never notice. Every successful hunt has to feed the group for days, because a failed hunt in these conditions is not just disappointing, it is dangerous. Back at camp, meat is smoked and fat is rendered, both stored for the leaner stretches of winter. Hides are scraped, stretched, and worked into new clothing or shelter material. Children learn by watching, by small tasks handed to them early, because in this world there is no such thing as childhood without contribution. Knowledge is survival, and everyone is expected to hold a piece of it. As night falls again, the group gathers close to the fire. This is not just about heat. It is where stories are told, where skills are taught, where social bonds are reinforced night after night. Because in an environment, this harsh isolation can be a death sentence. You needed your group to survive the cold, and your group needed you. Here is the twist that tends to surprise people the most. It would be easy to assume that Ice Age life, all struggle and freezing wind and constant labor, was simply grim. But that framing misses something important. Researchers studying the skeletal remains from these periods have found signs of individuals who survived into old age. Individuals with healed injuries that would have required care and support from others over long periods, and evidence of art, ornamentation, and ritual even in the harshest environments humans occupy. These were not people merely enduring existence. They were living full lives inside communities that clearly valued cooperation, skill, and even beauty, in conditions that modern humans would consider apocalyptic. There is also a deeper reframe hiding underneath all of this. We tend to imagine technology as a recent invention, something that started with the wheel or writing or electricity. But a mammoth bone house is technology. A tailored fur coat is technology. A controlled fire that burns reliably through an 18-hour Arctic night is technology. Your ancestors were not primitive people barely scraping by. They were engineers, tailors, architects, and fire specialists solving one of the hardest survival problems our species has ever faced, using nothing but bone, hide, fat, and fire. Now think about your own relationship with cold. You step outside in winter wearing a jacket built from materials engineered in a lab, insulated with synthetic fibers designed to trap heat far more efficiently than fur. Your home holds a steady 70 degrees no matter what the temperature does outside, controlled by a thermostat you barely think about. If you get cold, the fix takes seconds. You touch a dial, or you walk to a warmer room. None of that comfort erases where it came from. Every layer of insulation on your winter coat is a distant descendant of a sewn hide from Sungir. Every furnace quietly running in your basement is a distant descendant of a fire kept alive through an Ice Age night. You are not separate from that history. You are the result of it. Every generation that figured out how to build a warmer shelter, sew a tighter seam, or keep a fire from dying overnight was quietly building the comfort you now barely notice. The cold nearly stopped our species before it truly began. It didn't. Not because our bodies grew stronger, because our thinking did. The cold still hits you first when you step outside today, but now you barely feel it at all. And that quiet, forgettable comfort is not an accident. It is a victory, thousands of generations in the making.